about one thing. The most recent influx, which has definitely been the biggest in the last decade, are people who are pretty much adherents of radical Islam. And radical Islam's values do not correspond with the values of liberal democracy. You know, you can't rationalize and go, well, you know, maybe they...
So it's getting worse.
Of course it is. I mean, nobody who is either living in Europe or has, you know, over several brain cells can say that the situation in Europe is getting better. The issues with radical Islam are getting much worse. Europe is in a very precarious position.
All right, then our perception is accurate.
Yes.
Because we're not speaking about immigrants of 60 years ago. We're speaking about the more recent immigrants. A radical Muslim who comes from Pakistan to Britain, and if he were to be on a show where he felt he could tell the truth, so with a fellow Muslim interviewing him, and said, well, since you have these views, why did you move to a non-Muslim country? What would he say?
It's a non-Muslim country for now.
Okay, so there is a deep belief that the Islamicization of Europe is possible.
I think it is possible. It's maybe a very long way away.
No. I mean, but it's a deep belief in them.
Well, yes, of course. I mean, you look at some of the speeches from the likes of Qaradawi and other Saudi clerics, and they've talked about this decades ago. That, you know, we're not going to conquer Europe by the sword, but demographically, that's what we're going to do. They've said it. They've already said it.
What is it? Through dawah?
Yes, this dawah and this militant propagation.
Yes. Yeah, Qaradawi among others. That's right. I was just watching a video on that by Steve Emerson. How ironic. Well, sir, you are in the United States because of your story, and your story is one of courage. And I always wonder how people change, especially for the better. And let's begin with your background, and then I'll leave as a sort of surprise to the audience where you ended up. Your background vis-a-vis, for example, and this is the specific issue, Israel and the Jews. What did you learn as a child?
I can just sum it all up very quickly with something my dad used to frequently say. That Hitler was a brilliant / great man. His one failing was that he didn't kill enough Jews.
And now, it's a difficult thing for a son to say.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. So I want to make a point, but only if it's true. Was your dad in other ways a good man?
Yes and no. You know,
so he was a morally difficult person.
In some ways not. You know, he was quite respected in the community as being quite religious.
Right.
So it's.
Did your siblings agree with him? Do you have siblings?
Yeah, I have an older sister.
When we come back, I am going to talk. I am going to ask Mr. Hafeez, Kasim Hafeez, the question: why and when did all of the immersion in Jew hatred that you had in Britain change? You're listening to the Dennis Prager Show. .com. I'm Dennis Prager, and I am fascinated by my guest. He's a British Pakistani Muslim, Kasim Hafeez. He's 28 years old, obviously well-spoken, as you hear. And his story is a very, very compelling, very courageous, and very depressing. The Jew hatred, anti-Semitism, if you will, that he was raised in, which is normative among many British Muslims. And remember, he is third generation. This is not the new wave, which you describe as even more radical. This was the old wave. And you bought it all, is that correct? You believed it all.
Yes.
Again, your father said to you, it's too bad Hitler didn't kill them all.
Yes. So
it was just a given. Jews are evil and need to be destroyed.
Yeah, there was always negative conversation. Whenever I grew up in the predominantly Muslim community. Okay, so I was surrounded by Muslims, and even when there wasn't out-and-out anti-Semitism to that extent, whenever you talked about Jews, there's always this negativity, and it creeped into every facet of society. One of the things I always talk about is when I was growing up, the Salman Rushdie affair happened with Satanic Verses, and there was a movie which came out of Pakistan, and it's about the Rushdie affair. It's awful Pakistani cinema. But throughout that film, you constantly see this actor who's playing Salman Rushdie having meetings with Hasidic Jews. These characters who are Hasidic Jews, and it's all this conspiracy that the Jews are behind Salman Rushdie to basically...
Yeah, Salman Rushdie was the Indian Muslim novelist who wrote a novel which Khomeini issued the famous or infamous fatwa that any Muslim who murders Salman Rushdie would be given a great deal of money and be honored by the world Muslim community. Salman Rushdie then spent at least a decade in hiding. A terrible, horrific burden on a man who, by the way, I happen not to agree with in any of his politics, but it is irrelevant. Totally irrelevant. I just want to say, though, it's not like it's a kindred spirit to me, Salman Rushdie, but he's a kindred spirit in that he's a human being who should be allowed to speak freely. So this is new to me, that he was presented as a puppet of the Jews.
Yes.
Amazing. I mean, everybody is a puppet of the Jews. If Salman Rushdie met a Hasidic Jew, I will give money to Al-Qaeda. I mean, the idea is so preposterous that, before this happened, that he ever met a Hasidic Jew. Maybe afterwards, but it's just absurd. So what happened? You are going along merrily in life. You were raised a religious Muslim, I take it.
Yeah, it's a very religious family, but here's the thing. My family weren't radical. I know by what I've said.
No, you're right. That's why I said to you earlier, was your father otherwise a good man?
Yeah.
It's so deep that even in non-radical Muslims, Jew hatred is now normative.
Yes.
In Europe, at least.
Yeah, it's a huge issue. So, we were a religious family from a very Sufi background. The first gen, my grandparents who came over, not radical at all. I mean, really not radical at all. Opposed the Saudi ideology of Islam, which is basically join us or die, sort of thing. So, religious background, but it wasn't radical by any stretch of the imagination.
You are in the United States on tour to speak in Chicago and New York, among other places, for the wonderful organization Stand With Us, and people can find out about Stand With Us, of course, on the Internet. And you're here now today with me in Los Angeles, obviously, but I'm just saying this for the sake of my listening audience. So you are steeped in this normative anti-Semitic culture. What happens then?
Okay, so bear in mind, I was receiving these messages when I was 6 and 7. Okay, and when you're 6 and 7, you take them in, but they're pretty much in the background. It was when I went to Pakistan in 2000, and not for any nefarious reasons, to visit family, and it was the first time I saw this idea of violent jihad being promoted as an ideal. Everywhere I went in our village, there were posters, there were paintings on the side of mountain faces praising Lashkar-e-Taiba, the Pakistani-based terrorist organization. And
say the name again?
Lashkar-e-Taiba, the Army of the Pure.
Are they the ones? Yeah, they committed a number of atrocities.
Yeah, Mumbai, the Mumbai.
Yeah, the Mumbai, exactly.
Yeah. And they were being portrayed as heroes, and then I'm seeing this imagery which makes sense. I'm seeing the flag of Israel, the flag of America, the flag of India, because Pakistan, Kashmir, being burnt with the Lashkar-e-Taiba flag over, and it makes sense. All the dots are connecting. That okay, yes, the Jews and America are oppressing Muslims, and here's somebody who's doing something to fight back. So for years I've got these messages which have taken away my ability to think rationally. I'm thinking emotively, being bombarded with these graphic images of death and destruction that the Jews are behind, and now I'm presented with a response, somebody who's actually doing something, which is completely irrational because they're violent terrorists, but when you've been painted as the victim and helpless, here's somebody who's doing something about that.
Right. So what happened then?
I came back to the UK, and I deeply fell into that way of thinking. I started researching into their ideology. I was going on their website when they had one, and started reading into radical Islam. And here's the scary thing, Dennis. You go on the internet, you can find anything. You can find all sorts of bizarre material. but it's what I was able to purchase in UK bookshops, which is probably more troubling. I don't know if you're familiar in Islamic theology of the concept of the Dajjal, the Antichrist.
No, I am not.
In Islam, in the
I
end of time scenario, you have this character called the Dajjal, who is the Antichrist. And now I've taken a picture of a book that
is that a Quranic word?
The Dajjal, I think it comes from the Hadith, actually.
That's why, because I thought if it was Quranic, I was surprised I had not been familiar.
This is a book I bought in the UK, from a UK bookshop.
Emergence of Dajjal, the Jewish king. So the Antichrist is the Jewish king?
By what that author's saying.
Matlub Ahmed Qasmi. So this you bought in a regular UK bookstore?
It was an Islamic bookstore.
An Islamic bookstore.
If you just slide across, see some of the other material that was readily available.
Okay, so let's see here. Then this shows, obviously, all of Palestine and crushing. So who is holding the... someone is holding the Quran from which light emanates.
Yeah.
That is, I guess, the Muslim martyr? Who is that?
That was the Hamas suicide bomber.
So I'm right, an Islamic martyr. There you go. Okay. So there are all these violent images, obviously, and then beginning, then, of course, with Palestinian blood on the Holy Land report. Okay, I got you. So, in other words, this is normative. That's the point.
And here's the thing. This is the mild stuff.
This is the mild stuff.
Yeah, I bought copies of a DVD called Message of the Ummah, which is Al-Qaeda's main propagational DVD with English subtitles in the UK.
Yep.
2.5 hours of Al-Qaeda.
All right, when we come back, why did you change? I'm as curious as my listeners are. 1-8-Prager-776. Kasim Hafeez, 28-year-old Pakistani Muslim, my guest. I'm Dennis Prager, and I welcome you to the show, and I have a remarkable man in the room, and it's a very difficult subject. A British Pakistani Muslim, 28 years old, speaking about the normative upbringing among Muslims in Britain, saturated in Jew hatred of the genocidal type. It's not just ethnic bigotry. I wouldn't care much about that. It's always wrong, but it's not fatal. You changed.
Yeah.
Most people don't. Why did you? Or what happened?
It's, initially, I was at this point where I thought, okay, I've done everything I can to be anti-Israel and anti-Semitic almost, and I thought I need to now basically go and fight. I need to go to a training camp and fight. That's the stage I was at. By chance, I walk into a bookshop and I see this book, The Case for Israel by Alan Dershowitz. And I looked at the book and I thought, okay, Zionist propaganda. Israel has no case. I'll read this book, be able to disprove it, and fine. No problem. And I thought I was a real expert in the Middle East. So I start reading this book and I'm confronted by a few arguments which stood out. Firstly, a Palestinian state has never existed. And I thought, no, that's not true. We all know, there was a Palestinian state, the European Jews came and stole the land. That's what I understood. There's been a Jewish presence in the land for thousands of years. Again, no, that's not right. The European Jews came and stole the land. In 1948, it wasn't the Israelis who started the war, it was the Arab states who invaded. Again, didn't make sense to me. It was not what I knew. So I thought, okay, look, he's got this book published. Somehow I can disprove these facts, because this is obviously not true. Turned out it was true. So it really created a crack in this wall of lies, basically. And I got to this point where I started researching. I looked at both sides, very pro-Israel books, very anti-Israel books. I think there's about 2 pro-Israel books in existence, actually. And also this was the first time I'd read anything supportive of Israel at all. It's the first time I'd read anything even mildly supportive of Israel. So after a period of really uncertainty, and I dropped into quite a low depression because I just didn't know. It's very difficult to go from a position where you firmly believe something with the conviction to die for, and you're seeing it's based on the premise of lies and misinformation. It's difficult to deal with. It's not an easy thing. So eventually I decided the only way I'm going to get any closure on this is to go to Israel.
Wow.
To catch a flight to Israel, and we'll see what happens. I went to Israel. I spent 8 hours in security at the airport. It wasn't a bad experience, okay? You know, people say, it's an apartheid state. Go to Saudi Arabia and tell me about apartheid. Go to Saudi Arabia and then talk about apartheid and racism. So I go to Israel, and it blows me away. There's no other way to describe it, because you see the truth. The truth is in front of your eyes. You're seeing Muslims and Christians going about their daily life. You're seeing Israelis. You're learning about Israel, this democratic state that shares these incredible values. And here's the interesting thing. You know, there's a lot of opposition to Israel from Muslims. Okay, you know, generally there is, but Muslims in Israel have more rights than anywhere else in the Middle East. That's a fact. You know, you can gloss it over, or you call Israel whatever you like, but it's a fact. And one of the key, what really gave me that kind of moment of clarity, when I saw all these things, when I saw the real Israel, I didn't see any apartheid signs. I saw people of all colours and all religions, was going to the Western Wall. Because I went to the Old City, I went to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, I went to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and I decided to go to the Western Wall. And firstly, I didn't know if I'd be allowed near it. You know, I'm not Jewish, and in Saudi Arabia, if you pray slightly different from what they call Islam, you're going to find yourself manhandled at the mosque. That's how the Saudis deal with things. So I get to the security checkpoint. They check my passport. Fine. I put on one of the awful cardboard kippas they had at the time. You know, I kind of duck and weave past the Chabad emissaries with the tefillin. I thought, you know, let's not get carried away with this. But the whole time I'm thinking, what am I doing here? This makes no sense. I don't know what to do. But eventually, as I get closer to the Western Wall, I put my hand on the wall, and eventually my forehead goes against the Western Wall.
Tell us the remainder when we get back. Yes. Forgive me. We'll be back in a moment. I'm Dennis Prager. Our Facebook page, facebook.com/PragerU. You're listening to the Dennis Prager Show. I don't want to overstate my emotional reaction here, because you don't last in public life if you engage in exaggeration. You can get away with it a little, but not constantly. So therefore, know that what I say is true. In my emotional reaction to my guest, Kasim Hafeez, 28-year-old Pakistani Muslim Brit, and his evolution from normative Muslim Jew hater in Britain to seeker of truth. We use that term too loosely. I had in my studio many years ago, what was her name? Irina, the Polish Catholic woman who risked her life to save Jews. Updike, yes. An entire Broadway show was made about her. And I feel similarly. You don't have to react, sir, because no reaction is necessary. But there are people who are good and courageous, and it's rare. Here he is. He's steeped in this world of genocidal hatred. Picks up a book that says, well, maybe what you've heard are lies, and they were all lies. And then actually visits Israel to check it out. So you're at the Western Wall, and what happens?
So I kind of put my head against the Western Wall, my forehead, and, you know, without overstating it or it being cliche, it was the first time I really had any clarity when I've looked at Israel. Because I thought, okay, here I am at the very center of the Jewish world, the very heart of the Jewish world. I'm in the capital of Israel, a Jewish state, a democratic state, a state where its minorities are protected, there is freedom of religion, you know, gender equality. Okay. And then I'm thinking, right behind me, if you've ever been to the Western Wall, there's the Israeli flag behind, and I thought, there's the flag of Israel right behind me. Yeah, the white flag with 2 blue stripes and the Star of David. I'm here in a Jewish democratic state. And then it really dawned on me that no matter what happens from this point on, no matter what peace agreements may be signed, no matter what conflicts or wars happen, there are 6 million who won't actually make it to this point ever. There are 6 million who died with the idea of next year in Jerusalem who won't ever see this. And that really brought it home to me in ways that I'd not recognized at all, because I thought, okay, this isn't about politics at all. It's not even to some extent religion. This is about survival. You know, God forbid that the situation occurs as it did in Europe in the 30s and 40s, where the world shut its doors to the Jews. This is an ironclad promise of never again. This is the Jewish homeland. This is where this is Judaism's soul, and this is their home now. No matter what happens, there is a home to go back to. There is an Israel they can go back to. And the most incredible thing, what the miracle of Israel for me is, more than anything, is that the Jewish people have suffered persecution, Holocaust, conflict with their Arab and Muslim neighbors for decades, even to this day. Yet the state of Israel has not allowed the hatred of its enemies to define who they are as a nation and a people. And that's not only difficult to do, that's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. It really is. It's a miracle in itself.
How did you then return home? Were you estranged from your family, from your friends?
Well, I came back to the UK, and I was given 2 choices. I could either go, well, I had a great holiday,
They knew where you went.
Yes. I could either go, I had a great holiday, or I could say, okay, no, this is unacceptable, how Israel is vilified. The second choice was the most logical for me because it was the right thing to do. So I had 2 main reactions. My parents are separated. So with my father, this was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. We have nothing to do with each other anymore. This was an irreconcilable difference. A lot of my friends just refused to listen. And that's the most frustrating thing. When people aren't willing to listen, they just cut you off, or they just, no, I don't want to hear. Some people were willing to listen. It's quite interesting. My auntie, my sister, some of my friends are now quite supportive of Israel and quite supportive of what I do.
I just want to say to my listeners, now do you know the power of the individual? Why I have said in a totally different context, obviously. We're not talking about genocidal hatreds, obviously, but where you can make such a difference in the lives of the people in your life. If he could, in that community, surely we can, whatever we stand for in our own communities. So some friends are actually turned around.
Yes, this is quite a funny story and quite interesting. My auntie, very devout Muslim, wears a headscarf, okay? And she will go to get her children from nursery wearing the Israeli Defense Forces sweatshirt that I bought her. So that completely confuses people.
That you got to get a picture of that.
I definitely will. So that's quite interesting. My sister similarly, she wears her Israeli Air Force sweatshirt all the time. So yeah, they because they know me, they've known me for years, and they've actually gone, okay, you've had this change.
Are you going to write a book on your story?
Everybody asks me that, and my honest answer, right now there are no plans, because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
You don't have to tell me. I think you should, though. I think it's good for you, and it's good for the world. Kasim Hafeez, it has been an honor, sir.
Thank you.
It truly has. He is speaking in various cities for Stand With Us. Stand With Us is linked. It's up at DennisPrager.com. Sir, thank you. How do you say thank you in Urdu?
Shukriya.
Oh, shukriya, just like Arabic. Shukran, yeah. Very powerful. I have thoughts on what you have just heard. Next time, I'd love to talk to you about the America hatred that saturates that part of the world, because they're always linked.
Yes.